All right, hello everyone, and welcome to our 35th episode of In the Trenches, Kroll's weekly cyber threat intelligence briefing. Today is January 29th, 2024, which is National Bubble Wrap Day. This is the day we pay homage to the unsung hero of stress. Everyone, you can't resist the urge to pop them all. So here's to you, a tiny burst of joy. Happy Bubble Wrap Day, because sometimes, a little pop goes a long way. So in today's briefing, we'll be covering the most recent trends that our threat intelligence team is witnessing in the trenches. My name is Keith Wojcicki, Global Head of Threat Intelligence. This week, we are joined by Associate Managing Director Lori Iacono, Senior Vice President George Glass, Vice President Sarah Becker, Vice President Dave Truman, and Senior Associate Ryan Hicks from our Cyber Threat Intel team. So let's talk news you can use for January 29, 2024. So as we see a shift in illicit activity and scamming, the security field is witnessing a rise and growth in ransomware and darknet markets. These trends are suggesting that ransomware attackers may have adjusted to organizations' cybersecurity improvements due to ransomware revenue payments going down as more victims refuse to pay. So that's something to keep an eye on. Snatch Ransomware has released alleged information on various U.S. government officials by posting the list on their data leak site that directs users to the Telegram channel. With the U.S. elections ramping up, this could be extremely impactful. So again, we'll watch that and see where that comes in the news. If you do have any questions or concerns, please contact Kroll at cti@kroll.com with any of these stories. So now let's get into today's briefing. Today we'll be covering the following trends our team is concentrating on. We're going to start with Microsoft and HP attacks, get into some authentication bypass in Fortra, remote code execution, the battle between Apple and malware, always interesting, KASSEIKA ransomware group and what tactics they are employing, and then our week 3 malware spotlight looking at PRIVATELOADER. And one thing that's going to be new, we're going to talk about credential releases and billions of them. Lori's going to talk about that. And Sarah's going to shed some light on the track of Ransomware Roundup. So let's get into Microsoft and HP. So an espionage campaign conducted by KTA-014, we all know it as Cozy Bear, Midnight Blizzard, against Hewlett Packard and Microsoft has come to light through the Security and Exchange Commission. And short statements released by HP and Microsoft were following. According to the statements, the intrusions began in May 2023 for HP and November 2023 for Microsoft, but were really not detected until December 2023 and January 2024, respectively. KTA-014 targeted email accounts of cybersecurity professionals, senior leadership, sales functions at both organizations, and exfiltrated data and monitoring email exchanges, which is extremely sensitive. According to the HP SEC statement, the threat actor accessed and exfiltrated data beginning in May 2023 from a small percentage of HP mailboxes belonging to individuals in our cybersecurity go-to-market businesses, segments, and other functions. HP was alerted of this activity on December 12th of 2023. HP also noted that the attack was likely connected to a prior security event, also attributed to the same threat actor, which involved unauthorized access and exfiltration of a limited number of SharePoint files as early as May 2023. It was alerted on this malicious activity in June 2023, just 1 month later. Microsoft provided more detail in their reporting. They stated beginning in November 23, the threat actor used a password spray attack to compromise a legacy non-production test tenant and to gain foothold, and then used the account's permissions to access a very small percentage of Microsoft corporate email accounts, including members of the leadership team, employees in our cybersecurity, legal, and other functions, and exfiltrated some emails and attached documents. The investigation indicates that they were initially targeting email accounts for information related to Midnight Blizzard itself. Microsoft released an update on the 25th of this month stating that KTA-014 used OAuth applications, which Kroll reported earlier this month, to maintain persistence in the environment. The misuse of OAuth also enables the threat actors to maintain access to applications even if they lose access to initial compromised account. So Midnight Blizzard leveraged their initial access to identify and compromise a legacy test application that had elevated access to the Microsoft corporate environment. So What does this mean? Well, while it's impossible to say that these two events are currently connected, the timing of the two campaigns were discovered is something to note, as it is likely that KTA-014 has at least attempted to compromise other organizations that research and maintain information on them, but have not discovered or disclosed the breaches. So additionally, while HP and Microsoft investigations continue, it would be prudent to consider the significant supply chain risks these campaigns pose. We need to keep our eye out for this one. Although the initial reports by HP and Microsoft indicate that espionage was the actor's primary motivation, it's important to consider what additional access the threat actors could have gained in their significant amount of time they have access to each other's targets. So we want to watch out, make sure that if we are exposing and talking about KTA-014, we look at our systems for sure. So with that, we're going to turn it to the next story with George. George, we've been seeing a major intake of vulnerabilities, which in turn, really requires us to send out our out-of-band reports to partners about the vulnerabilities. Now, this week, we're looking at a new one with GoAnywhere, which really is a favorite of ransomware groups. So can you let us know what you're seeing there in the trenches?
Thanks, Keith. Yeah, at the risk of sounding too much like Smash Mouth, they don't stop coming and they don't stop coming. And we've got a few more vulnerabilities this week. Last week, we reported on a number of vulnerabilities regarding various internet exposed devices. One of the worst possible things for there to be a vulnerability in, as we learned last year with MoveIt and indeed GoAnywhere, is MFT platforms. And there is a new authentication bypass vulnerability in GoAnywhere MFT, CVE 2024-0204, with a CVSS score of 9.8, a critical vulnerability where proof of concepts have been released. All versions prior to 7.4.1 are affected. And what this vulnerability essentially allows is for an unauthenticated attacker to create an account on the device. Obviously, that's incredibly bad. And if you look at the middle of the screen there, the vulnerability actually lies in a path traversal vulnerability of all things, essentially allowing an attacker to set up an initial account which has admin privileges, and of course they get all of the permissions that come with that. Very important to note, as I said before, GoAnywhere was targeted last year by Clop Ransomware Group with a, at the time, 0-day vulnerability, CVE 2023-0669. There's all the indications are there that this is going to be exploited very heavily in the wild. So if you are running Fortra, GoAnywhere, MFT, we very, very strongly suggest you patch that device as soon as possible. If you have not done so already, we suggest that you adopt a assumed breach approach and conduct forensics on those devices to ensure that there's no additional accounts been set up in the time since the 4th of December. If we go to the next vulnerability, this one has been updated today. It's a remote code execution vulnerability in Jenkins, again with a CVSS score of 9.8. The CVE number is CVE 2024-23897. And again, proof of concept exploits are available for this. They were released over the weekend. For Jenkins versions 2.4.4.1 and earlier, and long-time support, 2.4.2.6.2 and earlier, essentially a threat actor may be able to execute code remotely. We very much recommend reading the report on this one, as there are a number of mitigating factors that organizations can take. There's some configuration options that must be set for certain permissions to be allowed in terms of the files that a threat actor can read, how unauthenticated attackers can gain read permission, and so on and so forth. It's quite a complicated thing to run through. So we definitely suggest reading the report on this one. But for those that run Jenkins, we obviously suggest that you patch this as soon as possible. Some very brief scanning that we did earlier suggests that there's potentially 80,000 Jenkins servers attached to the internet, and that was a fairly rough scan. So there could be very many more of those attached to the internet as well. So another Pretty serious vulnerability, and we're not even out of January yet. Moving on to the next story, we have some news filling in for Mukesh this week about Apple malware. Researchers at SentinelOne discovered that some of the signatures in Apple's Xprotect product, that's the thing that sits on the OS and does sort of static signature analysis for malware detection, was potentially not really keeping up very well with some of the more popular info stealer malware that is used against Mac OS. These include KeySteal, Atomic Stealer, which we've covered quite a lot in recent months, and Cherry Pie, which is written in Go, and that has quite some connotation for targeting members of the cybersecurity community as well. Our recommendations with this one are, of course, to try and bolster the defenses that already come built in with macOS by deploying endpoint detection response or next generation AV products to better bolster those defenses, move past static detection and go to behavioral detection. That's all for me this week. Back to you, Keith.
Thanks, George. Really appreciate the updates. There's a lot going on. We just need to make sure we're very vigilant to all this, and just keep watching these amazing videos and you'll get all the good updates. So Dave, we're seeing a new kid on the block here that's employing a method of bypassing organization securities. Can you update us on KASSEIKA's tactics and what you're seeing?
Yep, thank you, Keith. Trend Micro released a report detailing information regarding the ransomware operation KASSEIKA using bring your own vulnerable driver technique. According to the report, a signed driver from the IT agent system by TG Soft was used as part of a recent ransomware campaign. Kroll CTI checked the open source list of vulnerable drivers. This driver has been known to be vulnerable since at least January 2023, indicating that it is likely the actor utilized a similar resource rather than discovering the driver through their own vulnerability research. Trend Micro speculates that due to similarities in the code base, a link exists between KASSEIKA and Black Matter, either by shared membership or purchasing the Black Matter source code. The campaign utilized phishing emails for initial access and made use of radmin and Mimikatz to elevate privileges. Once the required privileges were obtained, the actor deployed the ransomware across the network, something accomplished using PSExec and Windows batch files. Bring your own driver technique grew in popularity throughout 2023 as an easy way to maliciously interact with the kernel. However, due to the requirement of the driver having to be signed, file hashes are a more useful detection IOC than with other binaries. These hashes can be attained from sites such as loldriver.io. Also, detectionals looking for writing files of .sys files to suspicious locations or with suspicious process parents might help in protecting an environment. Thank you, Keith.
Thank you very much, Dave. Appreciate it. Now, week 3 of our Malware Chronicles, we're going to go with Ryan. Ryan, what you got? What you seen in PrivateLoader?
Thanks, Keith. Hi, everyone. So yeah, looking at PrivateLoader kind of overview this week. So firstly, kind of it's as the name suggests, it is a loader with malware type. It kind of really putting it against all sectors really as being targeted, and I'll kind of explain why during the initial access. And it's sort of ongoing, sort of observed in the wild, still seeing it today. So the PrivateLoader itself was first observed kind of a couple of years ago in 2022. It's often seen before the deployment of well-known info stealers, so malware such as Redline, Raccoon, SmokeLoader, loading those. It has relatively few capabilities, and that's really because its main purpose really is to get on a victim machine, execute, contact command and control, and then install that next payload. And it runs as a pay per install service, whereby the developers of the malware are paid based on the number of installations their PrivateLoader achieves on target systems. So in that scheme, the attackers are paid by third parties who have kind of vested interest in spreading PrivateLoader. In terms of initial access, and this is why kind of the sectors are all sectors, it's been seen delivered to victims through websites offering cracked versions of software. Again, as we see with a lot of information stealers, so it's really just sort of sat there waiting for victims to go out and get them. So not necessarily targeted to, or thrown at victims, specific sectors, but just waiting for anyone really to go out and grab it. And in terms of kind of persistence, one observed method of persistence is from a private loader's install function. It will look to copy the loader itself into the program data folder and create a Windows service. If that fails, it will then attempt to kill existing Google update processes and then replace the update or replace it with the executable of itself, essentially creating that persistence. And upon execution, it also contacts the command control servers, which are held within its configuration file. And one domain hosting additional payloads, which kind of pointed out of interest here, which I saw being used across multiple samples, was vk.com, which is the Russian social media platform. And that's seen in the top right there during some sandbox analysis. Actors using PrivateLoader previously used Discord, but now it looks like VK has become more prevalent, likely due to the increased awareness of Discord kind of being used to host malware. And then lastly, looking at kind of how it does that last stage, in addition to the install option for the loader, it also has a start option where the main function loads the final payload into memory. So that final payload is where what he has downloaded from VK in this example. It then decrypts it, injects it into a running process. And again, that final payload is often kind of an information stealer, which then conducts the actions on objective for the actor. So PrivateLoader really just that kind of first stage for an actor to get onto the machine and then be able to run the final payload for a threat actor. That's it for this week's Spotlight. I'll hand back to Keith.
Thank you, Ryan. I appreciate that. Lori, so the release of Credentials is always something organizations fear for sure. Can you dive into why we should be, I don't know if the right word is terrified, but alerted on this one that you're about to brief us on?
Yeah, thanks. And I think the goal here is to stop a little bit of the panic here. But yeah, I've been looking into two different headlines within the past few weeks related to exposed credentials. The first was a data set known as NAS API. This was related to about 71 million credentials that were being ingested into the Have I Been Pwned website. As well as this week, reports from a security researcher coming out with a data set alleged to contain about 26 billion credentials, which they're dubbing the mother of all breaches. But when you kind of peel back what's actually in these data sets, what you find is that the mother of all breaches isn't actually a breach. Rather, both of these lists are data sets that contain credentials such as usernames, in some cases plain text passwords, that were previously exposed either through historical data breaches, some of those dating back as far as a decade ago, or through information stealer logs that were offered on sites such as Russian markets, where users can buy credentials to try to take over accounts. Now, what's kind of the takeaway for all of us from the publicization of these kind of headlines? Well, the first thing that we see here is the fact that threat actors seem to go to some great detail to compile, maintain, and store these large lists of credentials shows us that passwords are still very valuable in the cybercriminal underground as a way to get into systems. And a lot of that is banking on the fact the individuals may be reusing passwords across websites. So what are some of the mitigations or steps we can take both from the user side as well as from the organizational side to minimize against the impact of these kind of data sets? First of all, from a user side, things such as multi-factor authentication, which means that someone can't get into your login with just password alone. As well as using some kind of a password manager for individuals that can help avoid password reuse, as well as help generate more complex passwords that would be less easy to guess. From the organizational perspective, we've certainly seen in the past, we have seen lists like this after there's headlines about them, we see them become readily available on various dark web markets. And usually the impact there is that sometimes we've seen an uptick in phishing attacks, because now they may be able to easily generate a list of email addresses related to organizations. We also see them used in credential stuffing attacks. So these, again, going back to that idea that they think a lot of these passwords are being reused across sites, they will do kind of these massive credential stuffing campaigns to see where they can find successful authentications. So the same thing there. If organizations are employing best practice, such as regular awareness and education around, identifying phishing emails, that's always very important to help minimize that risk. And then with regards to the credential stuffing attacks, if there's some kind of MFA or even CAPTCHAs on the site, that can also minimize the risk of that damage. So as I said, we never want to hear of, plain text passwords out there. In this case, we did kind of want to calm down the hype that it's not actually a new breach. A lot of this may be out there already. And if you have, some kind of credential monitoring, you may have already been aware of these for your employees. But that is the news on the mother of all breaches, which is not actually a breach. And I'll hand it back to you, Keith.
Thanks, Laura. And that's actually really good to know. If anyone has any questions out there that you want to discuss this, because this, it could lead to all different types of attacks if needed, or not if needed, but all types of attacks with these credential releases. So if you have any questions, please reach out to us. We can explain and kind of walk through things with you guys. So with that, Sarah, got a lot going on in the ransomware roundup. Let's saddle on up and mosey on over to what's going on in the ransomware feed bag. What do you got for us today?
Thank you, Keith. We have a new ransomware shaming site that we just identified. This emerged around, I want to say the middle of January, because they do have one victim posting as of right now. That was from January 15th. So the ransomware shaming site is called Slug. They are performing data extortion attacks with no file encryption, and negotiations for victims, or victim in this case, are also conducted through the Session app. So their data leak site is very minimal as of right now. All they have is what we can see in the screenshot below is just the victim posting. There really isn't any kind of other sections like an About Us or Contact Us. Some other ransomware groups do have those various tabs on their shaming sites as they become bigger groups. So we're monitoring this to see kind of how Slug develops. Within their first victim posting, the ransomware group did include the organization's general information, like a quick bio, and as the exfiltrated data size and leaked plans for when the data may be released. So that's what we have going on for Slug. And then our next story, we're seeing threat actors utilizing and gaining initial access through TeamViewer. So researchers covered 2 recent attempts by threat actors to deploy ransomware involving TeamViewer. TeamViewer is a software that a lot of companies use within their organization to enable remote support and access to like endpoint devices. So both of these failed cyber attacks involved attempts to install a certain possible ransomware based on a leaked builder for Lockbit 3.0. Further research into this attack showed that the threat actors had gained initial access to both endpoints via TeamViewer. According to researchers, they are saying that the logs pointed to the attacks originating from an endpoint with the same host name, indicating the same threat actor was behind both incidents. On one of the computers, the threat actor spent just over 7 minutes after gaining initial access via TeamViewer, and then on the other computer, the attacker session lasted more than 10 minutes. So how the threat actors were able to gain access, it might have been possible due to them purchasing access from either an initial access broker who had credentials and other endpoints, might have been obtained through other means such as InfoSealer and any of those kinds of marketplaces who advertise InfoSealer logs. And that is all for me, Keith.
That is a lot. Thank you so much, Sarah. Yeah, we had a lot going on this week. Appreciate all the support and thank everyone for taking the time to tune in to Kroll's In the Trenches weekly cyber threat intelligence briefing. We hope you found the session informative. We really want to thank all the presenters today. If you do have any follow-up questions about this briefing or any other questions regarding a past briefing, please contact the team at cti@kroll.com. Again, it's cti@kroll.com. Thank you very much. Hope you have a wonderful week. And here's to January 2024. Looking forward to February. Take care, all.